Gods of the Junii, with this offering I ask you to summon Tyche, Megara, and Nemesis, so that they witness this curse. By the spirits of my ancestors, I curse Gaius Julius Caesar. Let his penis wither, let his bones crack. Let him see his legions drown in their own blood. Gods of the Inferno, I offer to you his limbs, his head, his mouth, his breath, his speech, his hands, his liver, his heart, his stomach. Gods of the Inferno, let me see him suffer deeply, and I will rejoice and sacrifice to you.
Well, that was an exciting way to get started for today's Torah portion. What you saw is a clip from the television series, HBO television series, Rome. And that is, on film, I think, the best representation of what curses were understood to be by the ancients. In this particular story, we see that there is someone who has a grudge against another family, and so she does. We've found these kinds of objects all over the place. What she does is she takes a sheet of metal. Sometimes it's precious metal like silver, sometimes it's base metal like lead. It is inscribed with curses. Curses are read over it, and usually there is some kind of voodoo image of the victim, the intended victim, that is either entrapped or mutilated or something like that in order to explain to the spirits what needs to happen and be executed. And it's kind of a performative magic moment. And that was really great. When I saw that first time, I was really impressed. Now, we're going to be talking about blessings and curses in our Torah portion this week, Re'eh, but it's going to be of a different measure. Before I get to that, however, I do have to talk about this. So I'm trying to come up with the right term for this. I'm not sure whether it is Goliath side or Gath side, but in any case, I was working with a bungee cord, and I was hitching it up to one corner, and it didn't hitch, and instead the bungee cord slung back like a sling and zapped me right in the forehead, Goliath style, and didn't knock me out, but it was pretty illustrative of the experience of being hit by a sling stone. So, I'm living the Bible day in and day out. So anyway, back to our Torah portion, Re'eh. Re'eh is the final stage of Moses's second discourse. And as was often customary when invoking authority and obligation upon people, it concludes with a presentation about blessings and curses. Blessings if you do what God has commanded you to do, curses if you don't. And it was understood in any sort of ancient contract or obligatory declaration or oath that there could be included a rather explicit list of blessings and an explicit list of curses that would come upon the person who was the partner in the agreement if they failed or lived up to the agreement. So that's what's happening in our Torah portion. Now, we've met curses before. We met the moment when Bilam tried to curse Israel on behalf of the king of Moab, and how that didn't work out. But in fact, this is slightly different, because this is a moment when we are acknowledging that our choices will bring blessing or curse to us. In other words, something that the moderns can understand a little bit more than inscribing a curse text, rolling it up, and then sticking it in someone's doorway or something. This is more like we make our choices and we have to lie in the bed that we create. So we understand that. We understand that the choices we make are have often tremendous effect on our future. So this is actually a fairly relatable portion. Now, we may not necessarily think about the terrifying things that could come upon us for idolatry. Idolatry was a big deal throughout the book of Deuteronomy. And a big deal throughout the Hebrew Bible. In fact, it's been said, and I think it's true, that much of the Bible is a continuing, multivariate narrative of the struggle of the people Israel to set aside idolatry. It took us almost 1,000 years, but by the time we came back from Babylonian exile, we had pretty firmly embraced the God of Israel and only the God of Israel. And the kinds of idolatry that afflicted us during the First Temple, the actual worship of alien gods, their figures and representations, those kinds of things was pretty much washed out of us. We were pretty committed to the God of Israel. It didn't mean that we gave up some of those kinds of magical practices that we saw at the very beginning, but we became overall a pretty loyal people, to the point that the surrounding people that encountered us after the exile, the Greeks, the Romans, the people who wrote about us in classical antiquity, were struck by our devotion to the God of Israel. It seemed such an extraordinarily intense and exclusive relationship that they couldn't help but comment on it. So we underwent a transformation. Now, blessings and curses, we understand the idea that we can curse ourselves through our decisions. We understand the idea we can bless ourselves through our decisions. But what I really want to focus on is simply one of the great gifts of Judaism to the modern world is the idea of personal choice. It seems obvious to us. We live in America in the modern age. We have learned about the importance of making right choices and these kinds of decision-making things that branch out like a tree. Depending on what we decide to do, things are going to happen. The ancient world, not so much. The ancient world's permeated with the idea of magic, of witchcraft, just like what we were seeing, that someone you don't even know or you couldn't even anticipate is going to bring a efficacious curse upon you, and your life and your very being is going to be harmed by an act of witchcraft. Of course, the ancients believed in things like the evil eye. And beyond that, on a more philosophical level, the ancients put a great deal of emphasis on fate and destiny, and the idea that our choices often are not our own, that in fact they are imposed upon us by the gods or by forces beyond the gods, whether you call them the Norns or the Fates or the Weirds or whatever that kind of meta divine force is, that most of the things that happen to us are dictated beyond us. Judaism makes an incredibly innovative claim that really most of what happens to us is decided by us. And the idea that we have choice, and that choice is mostly in our hands and can affect our own fate, is a pretty revolutionary thought in the ancient world. Now, does that mean we can always escape external forces? like The Secret. I don't know if you remember reading that back around 2007. It was basically you can think your way out of cancer, or your attitude determines whether your life is good or bad in the material things that happen to you. I don't think Judaism goes that far. We still have a certain notion of what we would say in Yiddish is beshert, right? Certain things are fated to happen to us. Uh, Whatever our choices or whatever we discover in the exploration of ourself as we grow and develop, we're usually born with a biological gender. We don't get to decide that. I will never be a basketball player. I can't force myself to be 6'6". So there is still a recognition that there are certain external forces that we cannot control. However, the Jewish vision is that we are creatures of maximal choice, that we have the power to bless and curse ourselves through our choices. And I think that's a really important idea. Even the free choice we have doesn't completely guarantee anything because we don't know all the possible outcomes, right? Um, Sometimes we make decisions collectively as a community or a society, an election, for example. And even though we individually chose one candidate, another candidate gets elected despite our desires. And we, as a democratic society, have this sort of covenant that we will accept the decision of the majority. So sometimes we can't control that. Sometimes we gamble in the nature of our choices. We choose to be vaccinated, even though there is incomplete information on what it means to take a certain vaccine, or we refuse to be vaccinated in the gamble that whatever infects us will not be lethal or debilitating. And so it is, there are certain realms of choices that aren't clearly blessings or curses one way or another. The best we can do is work with the probabilities. But it is the glory of Judaism that we emphasize choice. The famous passage that we read on Yom Kippur, no, Rosh Hashanah, is the one in Deuteronomy 29, where Moses says, "See, I place before you blessing and curse, life and death. Choose life, that you and your children may live and thrive in the land that I'm bringing you to." This is a remarkably empowering idea, and one that we should take with full seriousness. When we make our choices, we need to weigh them. That's a big, big responsibility. But that's the nature of the Jewish understanding of the human condition. Unlike some religious traditions, Judaism does not say that humanity is innately evil or innately depraved or trapped in some kind of false reality built around desire. Nor does Judaism actually say that we are, as a number of modern philosophies say, innately good. What I would say is that Judaism teaches us we are innately free, that just as our ancestors were liberated from the land of Egypt and brought to a good land and given the opportunity to carve their own path in the world, to make their own destiny, so each and every one of us is a microcosm of the Jewish people. We can become addicted or enslaved or habituated to certain bad decisions. But at the end of the day, it is really our power and our glory to choose the right way, the good way. It is not impossible for us, as the same passage in Deuteronomy says. This is not impossible for you. It's not as if the Torah were up in heaven and everyone has to say, go up to heaven and bring the Torah down to us that we may hear it and that we may do it. No, the thing is in your mouth and in your hand to do. So we revel in our choices. We revel in the opportunity to be, dare I say it, godlike in our capacity to make serious and consequential decisions. And so understand our Torah portion this week is just reinforcing that idea that we, to a great extent, own our own future. And therefore, we should choose life, but the choice is ours. Thanks for listening, everybody. Shavua Tov, and we'll see you for Taste of Torah next week.